The scorching summer of mercy. In the brutal summer of 1877, rancher Cole Harlan discovers a dead woman in the Wyoming dust, and 8 starving children locked inside a cabin surrounded by vultures. The town wants them gone. A corrupt sheriff wants them seized, and a well-dressed stranger with empty eyes wants to sell them to the highest bidder. But Cole Harlan has already buried too many innocents on this frontier, and he won't bury one more. This is the story of one man's stand against an entire territory's ugliest secrets, and the children who saved him right back. If you're watching from anywhere in the world, drop your city in the comments so I can see how far this story travels. Hit that like button, and let's begin. The heat came first. It always did in Wyoming summers, rolling across the high plains like something alive and hungry, baking the sage until it crackled, turning the sky into a white glare that made a man's eyes water just looking at it. Cole Harlan had lived through 17 summers on this land, and he'd learned to respect the heat the same way he respected winter, silent, patient, and ready to kill you if you weren't careful. He rode his northern fence line on a paint gelding named Rust, checking posts and wire in the late afternoon when the sun hung low and mean. Sweat darkened his shirt between his shoulders. Dust rose with every step the horse took, hanging in the air like fine powder. The land stretched empty in all directions, golden grass, scattered rock, the distant, jagged line of mountains that never seemed to get any closer, no matter how far you rode. Cole was 34 years old, though the sun and wind had carved lines around his eyes that made him look older. He'd been a widower for 3 years, ever since the fever took Sarah and their infant son in the same terrible week. He didn't talk about it. Didn't see the point. Grief was a private thing out here, something you carried alone while you worked, slept, and woke up to do it all over again. The cabin appeared in the distance like a broken tooth, a homesteader's place, abandoned for years, half swallowed by tall grass and creeping vines. Cole had ridden past it 100 times and never given it much thought. Squatters sometimes used it, drifters, people passing through who needed a roof for a night or two before moving on. But today, something was different. Rust's ears swiveled forward, and the gelding slowed without being asked. Cole felt it too, that prickling awareness that came from years of living alone in wild country. Something was wrong. He reined in 50 yards out and studied the place. The cabin door hung open, swaying slightly in the hot breeze. The windows were dark. No smoke from the chimney, no movement, no sound except the dry hiss of wind through the grass. But there were wagon ruts leading up to the door, recent enough that the grass hadn't reclaimed them yet. And lying in the narrow strip of shade along the cabin's east wall was a shape that made Cole's chest tighten. A woman. He dismounted slowly, ground-tying Rust, and approached on foot. The heat shimmered off the earth, making everything waver like a dream. Flies buzzed. The smell hit him before he got close, the sour, unmistakable stink of death beginning in the summer heat. She was young, maybe 25, dressed in a faded calico dress that had once been blue. Her hand was stretched toward the cabin door as if she'd been crawling toward it when she died. Her face was turned away, tangled dark hair covering her features, sunburned skin, cracked lips. No water bottle, no canteen, nothing. Cole crouched beside her, not touching, just looking. Dehydration, most likely. Exhaustion. The kind of death that came slow and mean when the sun cooked you and there was no water left to sweat. He was about to stand, already thinking about how to bury her, when he heard it. A sound so faint he almost missed it beneath the wind. A child's cry. Thin, desperate, coming from inside the cabin. Cole's hand went to the Colt on his hip, not drawing, just resting there, and he moved toward the open door. The darkness inside seemed absolute after the glare of the sun. He stepped across the threshold and waited for his eyes to adjust, breathing through his mouth to avoid the stench. The cabin was a single room, maybe 15 feet square. A stone fireplace on one wall, long cold. A rough table, 2 chairs, a pile of blankets in the corner. And huddled throughout the space, like scattered pieces of a broken puzzle, were children. 8 of them. Cole stopped breathing for a second, his mind struggling to process what he was seeing. They ranged in age from maybe 10 years old down to 3 or 4. Dirty faces, hollow eyes, clothes that hung off thin frames. Most were lying down, too weak to sit up. A smoky fire pit in the center of the room held the charred remains of what might have been roots or bark, something they'd tried to cook and failed. The smell was overwhelming. Sweat, sickness, spoiled food, human waste, desperation. One child moved. A girl, the oldest, dragging herself across the plank floor with her arms because her left leg twisted at an unnatural angle beneath her. She positioned herself between Cole and the others, her face fierce despite the exhaustion painted across it. Sunburned cheeks, tangled blonde hair, eyes that had seen too much. "Get out," she said. Her voice cracked, dry as the dust outside. "We got nothing left for you to take." Cole raised both hands slowly, showing empty palms. "I'm not here to take anything." "That's what the last one said." The girl's jaw trembled, but her gaze didn't waver. "They took our food, all of it. Said we were going to die anyway, so why waste it?" Behind her, another child whimpered. A boy, maybe 6, with skin darker than the others and eyes glazed with fever. A girl with Cherokee features held him, rocking slightly. 2 more children lay curled together beneath a threadbare blanket. A red-headed boy sat with his back against the wall, staring at nothing. And in the corner, almost invisible in the shadows, a tiny girl with matted brown hair clutched a rag doll and didn't make a sound. "How long?" Cole asked quietly. "Since what?" "Since you had water, real water, not from the creek." The girl's mouth worked. 3 days. Maybe 4. The woman, Miss Abigail, she went to find help. Said there was a ranch nearby. Said she'd bring back food and water and we should stay put and be good. Her voice broke. "That was, I don't know, 2 days ago? 3? Cole glanced back at the body outside. The woman had made it maybe a quarter mile from the main trail before the heat took her. She'd probably been lost, disoriented, dying of thirst herself. She'd died trying to save them. "Where'd you come from?" he asked. "Orphan train, out of Pennsylvania." The girl spoke mechanically, like she'd explained this before. "We were supposed to go to families, proper families. That's what they told us. But when we got to Laramie, nobody wanted us." She gestured at her twisted leg. "Nobody wants a cripple, or a half-breed, or a Negro, or kids who are too old or too young or too sick. So Miss Abigail said she'd find us a place, said she knew a good Christian woman who'd take us in." "Where was this place?" "I don't know. She had an address, a letter. But when the wagon broke down, she went looking for help and—" The girl's composure finally cracked. "She left us here. She said she'd come back. She promised." Cole looked at the children again, really looked. The boy with the fever, the silent girl in the corner, the Cherokee girl, the red-headed boy, a pair of twins with matching hollow eyes, and this fierce blonde girl with the twisted leg who dragged herself across the floor to protect kids who probably weren't even her siblings. He'd seen suffering before, seen death, buried his wife and son with his own hands, and kept going because that's what you did out here. But this, 8 children, abandoned and left to die because nobody wanted them, this was different. This was cruelty dressed up as civilization. "What's your name?" he asked the girl. She hesitated, like even that information might be dangerous. Nora Vance. "I'm Cole Harland. I've got a ranch about 3 miles south. Water, food, beds, shade. You want to come with me, you can. All of you." Nora's eyes narrowed with suspicion so deep it hurt to see in a child's face. "Why?" "Because you'll die if you stay here. People don't just help, not for free. I'm not asking for payment." "Then what do you want?" Cole thought about that. What did he want? To sleep through the night without dreaming of Sarah's last breath? To stop seeing his infant son's face every time he closed his eyes? To feel like his life meant something more than fence posts and cattle and empty rooms? "I want to do something right," he said finally. "That good enough?" Nora studied him for a long moment. Behind her, the other children stirred slightly, hope and fear warring on their faces. Finally, she spoke. "Miss Abigail, the woman outside, she died trying to save us." Nora's voice hardened. "She deserves a proper burial, not left for the buzzards. You do that first, then we'll come." Cole looked at this 10-year-old girl with a broken leg who was making demands of a grown man twice her size and felt something shift in his chest, something that had been frozen solid for 3 years. "All right," he said. "I'll bury her. But first, let's get some water in you. All of you. Can't have you dying on me before we even start." It took an hour to get them stable enough to move. Cole fetched water from his canteen and made them drink slowly. Not too much, not too fast, or they'd just vomit it back up. He had jerky in his saddlebag, hard as leather, but edible. He made them chew it slow, let their stomachs remember how to work. The boy with the fever, his name was Samuel, couldn't keep anything down. Cole stripped off his own shirt, soaked it in water, and wrapped it around the boy's burning forehead. The Cherokee girl, whose name was Awanasa, but who everyone called Wen, held Samuel and whispered to him in a language Cole didn't understand. The twins were David and Daniel, 8 years old, so alike Cole couldn't tell them apart. The red-headed boy was Patrick, 9, Irish by his accent. There was a 6-year-old girl named Mary with a persistent cough that sounded like it came from deep in her lungs. And then there was the smallest one. "What's her name?" Cole asked, nodding toward the silent girl in the corner. "Lily," Nora said quietly. "She hasn't talked since Philadelphia. Not one word." "What happened?" "Don't know. She was like that when we got on the train. Some of the attendants said her parents died bad. Fire, maybe, or fever. Nobody knows for sure." Cole approached Lily slowly, crouching down to her level. She was tiny, maybe 4 years old, with huge brown eyes that looked right through him. He held out a piece of jerky. She didn't move. "It's all right," he said softly. "You don't have to talk. You don't have to do anything you don't want to do. But you need to eat something, Lily. Just a little bit. Can you do that for me?" For a moment, nothing. Then her small hand reached out, took the jerky, and retreated back into herself. She didn't eat it, just held it. But it was something. Cole buried Abigail Brennan in the rocky soil behind the cabin, using a shovel he'd found inside. Probably the same one she'd planned to use to plant a garden that would never exist. The ground was hard, baked solid by the sun, and it took him the better part of an hour to dig deep enough to keep the scavengers out. Nora watched from the cabin doorway, leaning on a makeshift crutch Cole had fashioned from a broken chair leg. She didn't cry, just watched, her face set like stone. When he was done, Cole stood over the grave, hat in his hands. He wasn't much for words, but it seemed wrong to say nothing. "I didn't know you, ma'am," he said quietly. "But you died trying to save these kids, and that counts for something. I'll make sure they're all right. I promise you that. May you rest easy." He replaced his hat and walked back to the cabin where 8 pairs of eyes watched him with varying degrees of hope, fear, and exhaustion. "All right," he said. "Let's go home." Oh, the journey was brutal. 3 miles didn't sound like much, but when you had 8 children in various states of collapse and only 1 horse, it became an ordeal. Cole put the smallest ones on rust, Lily, Mary, and Samuel, tied in place with ropes so they wouldn't fall. The others would have to walk. Nora insisted on walking despite her leg. Cole didn't argue. He'd already learned that arguing with Nora Vance was about as useful as arguing with the weather. They moved slowly, stopping every few hundred yards when someone stumbled or needed water. The sun hammered down, relentless. Patrick threw up twice from heat and exhaustion. David, or was it Daniel, started crying and couldn't stop until his twin held his hand. Wen carried Samuel part of the way when he started to slip sideways on the horse, her thin arms trembling with the effort. Cole walked beside them, watching for signs that someone was about to collapse, his canteen making the rounds constantly. He'd lived alone for so long that the sound of children, their ragged breathing, quiet sobs, whispered encouragements to each other, felt foreign and overwhelming. But he kept them moving. The ranch appeared in the distance just as the sun touched the horizon, painting everything gold and orange. It wasn't much. A main house, a barn, corrals, a well with a hand pump. Simple, functional, built to last. Cole's refuge for 3 years of solitude, and now, apparently, about to become something else entirely. They reached the well first, and he had to physically restrain the older children from drinking themselves sick. He pumped water into a trough, made them cup their hands and sip slowly, teaching them restraint even as every cell in their bodies screamed for more. Then he got them inside. The house was clean but sparse. One main room with a kitchen area, a fireplace, a table and chairs. Two bedrooms off the main space. One Cole used, one that had belonged to Sarah and was still closed off, gathering dust. He opened that door for the first time in 3 years and saw the bed still made, her dresses still hanging on pegs, everything exactly as she'd left it. He swallowed hard and turned to the children. Girls in here, boys in my room. We'll figure out something better tomorrow. He fed them bread, cold beans, and more water. Most ate mechanically, too exhausted to taste anything. Samuel's fever broke finally, and he fell into a sleep so deep it looked like unconsciousness. Wen stayed beside him, her hand on his chest like she was afraid he'd stop breathing if she looked away. Lily sat in the corner with her rag doll, eyes open, staring at nothing. She'd eaten a little bread when Nora had put it directly in her hands, but that was all. Cole watched her and felt a familiar ache, the same helplessness he'd felt watching Sarah fade, watching his son struggle for every breath. Some things you couldn't fix with hard work and determination. Some broken things stayed broken. She'll come around, Nora said quietly beside him. She'd washed her face, and without the layer of dirt, she looked even younger, a child playing at being an adult because circumstances had forced her into it. She just needs time, and to feel safe. She feels safe here? Nora looked around the room, at the solid walls, the food on the table, the water in the barrel, the other children already drifting toward sleep. Safer than we've been in a long time, she said. Come. Cole didn't sleep that night. He sat on the porch, watching the stars wheel overhead, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of children breathing in his house. 8 souls who'd been thrown away by a civilization that claimed to be enlightened, left to die in the dust because they didn't fit someone's idea of acceptable. He thought about Sarah, about the baby they'd lost, about how desperate he'd been for a family, for the sound of life in these rooms. He'd prayed for it, back when he still believed prayer worked. And now here they were, 8 children who needed him, who had nowhere else to go, who'd watched him bury the one person who'd tried to save them and decided to trust him anyway. Cole wasn't a religious man anymore, hadn't been since he'd buried his wife and son. But sitting there in the dark, listening to those quiet breaths, he wondered if maybe this was what redemption looked like. Not thunder and lightning, not angels singing, just a chance to do something right, to stand between the vulnerable and a world that wanted to crush them. He'd spent 3 years wanting to die, moving through his days like a ghost haunting his own life. Maybe it was time to start living again. Morning came with birdsong and heat already building. Cole woke the children gently, fed them eggs and ham and fresh bread he'd baked before dawn. His first real cooking in years that wasn't just for survival. They ate like they couldn't believe it was real, like it might disappear if they looked away. Afterward, he surveyed his unexpected family and started making plans. Nora, can you read? Yes, sir. Don't call me sir. Cole's fine. You can read, you can teach the others. We'll have lessons in the morning before it gets too hot. He looked at Patrick. You know animals? Some, Cole. My dad was a stable hand before he died. Good. You'll help me with the horses. When you seem like you've got steady hands, I need help in the garden. David, Daniel, you're on water detail. Keep the barrel full. Keep the animals watered. Mary, you help Nora with the cooking and cleaning. He looked at Samuel. You rest until that fever's completely gone. And Lily, he crouched down in front of the silent girl. You don't have to do anything except be here. That's enough. For the first time since he'd found them, something flickered in Lily's eyes. Not happiness, not yet, but maybe the beginning of understanding that this place was different, that she was allowed to simply exist without earning it. They spent the day settling in. Cole showed the boys how to work the pump, taught the girls where the cooking supplies were kept, helped Nora fashion a better crutch from seasoned wood. He watched them explore cautiously, touching things like they couldn't believe they were allowed, claiming small spaces as their own. And for the first time in 3 years, his house felt like a home. But Cole Harlan knew better than to trust peace. He'd lived on this frontier long enough to know that nothing good came easy, and nothing worth having came without a fight. These children were safe for now, but now was a fragile thing. Trouble was coming. As he could feel it in his bones like weather changing, that electric tension before a storm breaks. Someone, somewhere, had noticed 8 children vanish from the orphan train system. Someone had questions. Someone had plans. And Cole suspected that when trouble finally arrived, it would come dressed in civilized clothes, carrying legal papers, speaking in calm, reasonable tones about what was best for the children. The most dangerous kind of trouble always did. 3 days passed in relative peace. Cole taught the boys how to mend fence. Nora started lessons, using an old Bible and a catalog as reading primers. Wen helped plant late-season vegetables, her hands gentle and sure with the seedlings. Mary's cough improved in the dry air. Samuel's fever stayed gone. And Lily still didn't speak, but she started following Cole around like a shadow, staying just out of reach, but always nearby, watching everything he did with those enormous eyes. On the 4th day, Cole rode into town for supplies. Redemption. Wyoming was barely worthy of the name. 1 street, maybe 30 buildings, a population that swelled to 300 when the ranchers came in on Saturday nights. A general store, a saloon, a church, a sheriff's office, a doctor's office that doubled as the undertaker's, and a hotel that rented rooms by the hour or the month with equal indifference. Cole tied Rust outside Palmer's Mercantile and went inside. A list Nora had written in careful script tucked in his shirt pocket. Flour, sugar, coffee, lamp oil, fabric for clothes. The children were wearing rags that wouldn't last another washing. Mrs. Palmer, a round woman with sharp eyes and a sharper tongue, noticed immediately. "Heard you've taken in some orphans, Mr. Harland." Word traveled fast in small towns. Cole had been hoping for another day or two before the gossip machine ground into motion. No such luck. "That's right," he said evenly, setting items on the counter. 8 of them, I heard, from that orphan train that came through last month. "Yes, ma'am." That's quite a responsibility for a single man. Folks are wondering about the propriety of the situation. Cole stopped counting coins and looked at her directly. The propriety of not letting children starve to death in the sun? Mrs. Palmer had the grace to flush slightly. "Well, of course, when you put it like that. But still, Mr. Harland, there are procedures, proper channels. The church has a committee for orphan placement. Perhaps it would be better if—" "The church committee already decided these children weren't worth placing," Cole interrupted quietly. "Too damaged, too different, too inconvenient. So they got left behind to die. I found them in time. End of story." "But surely—" "Are you going to sell me these supplies or not, Mrs. Palmer?" She pressed her lips into a thin line but rang up his purchases in silence. Cole paid, loaded his saddlebags, and was about to mount up when a voice stopped him. "Mr. Harland, a word." Cole turned to find Sheriff Rex Crowley approaching, a tall man with a politician's smile and a gunfighter's eyes. They'd never been friends. Crowley was the kind of lawman who enforced whatever rules benefited him personally and ignored the ones that didn't. "Sheriff, heard an interesting story. You've got 8 orphans living at your place." News travels fast. It does when it's unusual. Single man, bunch of kids, no legal guardianship papers, no oversight from any proper authority. Crowley shook his head in mock concern. "That's the kind of situation that raises questions, Cole." "Questions like what?" "Like whether those children are being properly cared for, like whether it's appropriate for them to be in that situation, like whether the law needs to step in and ensure their welfare." Cole heard the unspoken threat clearly. "Those kids are fed, sheltered, and safe. That's more than they were 4 days ago." "But is it legal?" Crowley smiled, showing too many teeth. "That's the real question, and I suspect the answer is no, which means I might have to pay you a visit, official business, make sure everything's proper." He let the word hang there, the same word Mrs. Palmer had used, weaponized now. Cole met his eyes steadily. "You do what you think is right, Sheriff. So will I." Crowley's smile widened. "I'll be seeing you soon, Cole, real soon." He walked away and Cole stood in the dusty street, watching him go, a cold certainty settling in his chest. The storm was coming, and it was going to be worse than he'd thought. Cole rode back to the ranch with Crowley's threat hanging over him like a noose, the summer sun beating down mercilessly as Rust's hooves kicked up small clouds of dust with each step. The saddlebags were heavy with supplies, but heavier still was the knowledge that he'd just painted a target on his back. and on 8 children who'd already survived more than most adults ever would. The ranch appeared in the distance, and even from half a mile out, he could see activity in the yard. Patrick was working with one of the young horses in the corral, his movements patient and sure. Wen was in the garden, her dark hair tied back with a strip of cloth. The twins were hauling water from the well, working together with the unconscious coordination that only twins seem to possess. And on the porch, Nora sat with Mary and Samuel, a book open on her lap, teaching them letters in the shade. Lily was there too, silent as always, but listening. Her rag doll sat beside her, positioned carefully like it was another student. It looked peaceful, normal, like a family, the kind of thing that men like Rex Crowley couldn't stand to see if it didn't fit their idea of how the world should work. Cole dismounted and unloaded the supplies, carrying them inside where the temperature was at least 10 degrees cooler than the yard. Nora followed him in, her crutch tapping against the wooden floor. "You were gone longer than usual," she observed. "Trouble?" The girl missed nothing. Cole set the flour sack on the counter and turned to face her. "Might be. Sheriff stopped me in town, asked questions about you kids, about whether it's proper for you to be here." Nora's face went carefully blank, the same expression she'd worn when he first found her, that protective wall that kept the world at arm's length. "What kind of questions?" "The kind that come before someone tries to take you away." Her knuckles went white on the crutch. "We're not going back. To the orphan system, to those people who sort us like cattle and throw away the ones nobody wants, we're not." "I know." "Do you?" Her voice cracked slightly. "Do you know what it's like, Mr. Harland? Standing in a train station while families walk past, looking at you like you're livestock at auction, having people lift your skirt to check your leg and then shake their heads like you're damaged goods? Watching Wen get passed over because she's too Indian? Watching Samuel get ignored because he's black? Watching Lily stand there silent while people say she's broken beyond fixing?" Cole had seen suffering in his time, had lived through his own version of hell when Sarah and the baby died. But the raw pain in this 10-year-old girl's voice was something else entirely, the kind of wound that came from being told repeatedly that you weren't worth loving. "I know what it's like to lose everything," he said quietly. "And I know what it's like to get a second chance when you don't deserve one. Those kids out there, you included, you're my second chance, Nora, and I'll be damned if I let anyone take that away." She searched his face for a long moment, looking for the lie, the hidden motive, the catch that always came. Finally, something in her eyes softened fractionally. "What are you going to do? Right now? Unpack these supplies and get dinner started. Tomorrow? I'll ride to the territorial judge's office in Cheyenne, file for emergency guardianship, get the legal papers started." He paused. "It won't be fast, and it won't be easy, but it's the right way. And if the sheriff doesn't wait for legal papers, then we'll cross that bridge when we come to it." Nora nodded slowly, then hobbled back outside to her students. Cole watched her go, this fierce, broken girl who'd appointed herself protector of 7 other broken souls, and wondered how children that young had learned to be that strong. Then he set about making dinner because that's what you did. You kept moving forward, kept doing the next right thing, and trusted that eventually the path would become clear. 2 days later, trouble arrived in a fancy buggy. Cole was in the barn, teaching Patrick the proper way to clean a horse's hooves when he heard the sound of wheels and harness. He stepped out into the brutal midday sun and saw a black carriage pulled by a matched pair of chestnuts, driven by a man in a suit too fine for Wyoming dust. The man who climbed down was maybe 40, with silver-shot hair, a neatly trimmed beard, and the kind of smile that never reached his eyes. He wore a vest with a gold watch chain, polished boots, and carried himself with the easy confidence of someone who'd never been told no in his entire life. "Mr. Harland, I presume?" The man extended a hand. "Silas Black. I'm with the Western Territories Children's Aid Society." Cole didn't take the hand. "Never heard of it." Black's smile didn't waver. "We work with various charitable organizations to ensure proper placement of orphaned and destitute children. I understand you've taken in several such children recently." 8 of them? "Yes, well, that's actually why I'm here." Black gestured broadly at the ranch. "This is quite the operation for one man. And 8 children. That's a significant responsibility. I'm sure you mean well, but there are proper procedures, trained professionals who specialize in child welfare." The children are fine. Are they? Black's tone remained pleasant, but his eyes went cold. Because from what I understand, these children were part of a supervised placement program, and they were removed from that program without authorization. That's technically kidnapping, Mr. Harland. Cole felt ice slide down his spine despite the heat. I found them dying in an abandoned cabin. Their chaperone was dead. I saved their lives. A noble impulse, certainly. But the law requires proper channels, paperwork, official oversight. Black pulled a document from his jacket. I have authorization from the territorial governor's office to assess the welfare of these children and, if necessary, remove them to more suitable accommodations. Let me see that. Black handed over the paper. It looked official enough. Seals, signatures, legal language that Cole couldn't fully parse, but that sounded legitimate. His hands tightened on the document. Where would you take them? We have arrangements with several excellent facilities, orphanages, work programs, apprenticeships. Each child would be evaluated individually and placed according to their capabilities. Meaning? Black's smile finally showed teeth. Meaning that a girl with a crippled leg, for instance, wouldn't be placed in a situation requiring physical labor. She might be better suited to a textile mill, light assembly work, that sort of thing. The Indian girl, Awanasa, is it? There are specialized schools for her kind. And the colored boy, well, there are farms always looking for extra hands. Cole heard what wasn't being said. Nora would be worked to death in a factory because her leg made her worthless for anything else. Wen would be shipped to one of those Indian schools that beat the heritage out of children and called it education. Samuel would be sold into labor that was slavery in everything but name. And the others? The twins are young and healthy, easy to place with families. The Irish boy has skills. The girl with the cough will need medical evaluation. As for the little mute one, Black shrugged. Some children are simply too damaged, but there are institutions for that sort of thing. Institutions. The word hung in the air like poison. Cole handed the document back carefully, keeping his voice level. How much? I'm sorry? How much do you get paid per child? Because this isn't about welfare. This is about money. Black's pleasant mask slipped for just a second, showing the predator underneath. Mr. Harland, I understand you're attached to these children, but you're not their legal guardian. You have no rights here. I'm offering you a chance to cooperate voluntarily. Get off my land. Excuse me? You heard me. Get in that fancy buggy and get the hell off my property. Black's expression hardened. I have legal authority. You have a piece of paper that says you can assess the children's welfare. Fine. You've assessed. You've seen they have food, shelter, clean water, and someone who gives a damn whether they live or die. Assessment complete. Now leave. For a moment, they stood facing each other in the dust and heat, two men on opposite sides of a line that had just been drawn. Then Black smiled, a real smile this time, cold and satisfied. This isn't over, Mr. Harland. Not by a long shot. You can refuse me today, but there are other ways. Legal ways. Ways that won't give you any choice at all. He climbed back into his buggy, gathering the reins. I'll be back with the sheriff, with proper documentation. And when I am, those children will come with me whether you like it or not. He drove away, leaving Cole standing in the yard with his hands clenched and fury burning in his chest like hot coals. Behind him, a quiet voice spoke. He's going to take us away, isn't he? Cole turned to find Nora standing in the barn doorway, her face pale, the other children clustered behind her. They'd heard everything. Not if I have anything to say about it. But he has papers. Legal authority. You said yourself you need to file for guardianship, and that takes time. Nora's voice was steady, but her eyes held the terrible resignation of someone who'd learned not to hope too hard. We've been through this before, Mr. Harland. People like him, they always win. They have the law on their side, and the law doesn't care about kids like us. Cole looked at them, 8 faces watching him, waiting to see if he'd be like all the other adults who'd made promises they didn't keep. Waiting to be disappointed again. The law can be fought, he said, and I know someone who might be able to help. That evening, after the children were fed and settled, Cole rode out again. Not to town this time, but to a ranch 10 miles west, where a woman named Eleanor Caldwell had lived alone since her husband died 5 years back. She was maybe 60, sharp as a tack, and owned more land than anyone else in the territory except the railroad. She was also the only person Cole knew who'd ever beaten Rex Crowley in a legal fight. Eleanor received him on her porch, a shotgun leaning against the wall beside her chair, not threatening, just present, the way any sensible person living alone kept a weapon handy. "Cole Harland." She studied him with eyes that missed nothing. "Haven't seen you in near 3 years. Not since Sarah's funeral." "Yes, ma'am." "Heard you've acquired a family. 8 orphans, the story goes. Word travels." "It does. Also heard Silas Black paid you a visit today. That true?" Cole blinked. "How'd you know that?" "Because he paid me a visit 3 hours ago, asking questions about you, wanting to know if you were financially stable, morally upright, fit to care for children." She smiled grimly. "I told him you were the most stubborn, cantankerous, antisocial man I'd ever met, but that you had more integrity in your little finger than he had in his entire body. He didn't appreciate that much." Despite everything, Cole felt his mouth twitch. "I appreciate it, though." "Don't. It was the truth." She gestured to a chair. "Sit down and tell me what's really going on." Cole sat and laid it all out, finding the children, the dead woman, Crowley's threats, Black's visit, the legal papers that gave him authority to take the children away. Eleanor listened without interrupting, her face growing darker with each detail. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "Silas Black," she said finally, "is a piece of work. He shows up every few months with his Western Territories Children's Aid Society, which sounds official but is really just him and a couple of cronies. He takes orphans, usually the ones nobody else wants, and places them in what he calls appropriate situations. Factories, farms, brothels if they're old enough and desperate enough." "Brothels? Where do you think damaged girls end up when nobody's watching, Cole?" "He doesn't call it that, of course. He calls it domestic service or hospitality work. But it amounts to the same thing." Her voice hardened. "I've been trying to expose him for 2 years. Every time I get close, he moves operations, changes names, finds a new sheriff willing to look the other way." "Crowley's protecting him." "Crowley's on his payroll, has been for at least a year. Every child Black places, Crowley gets a cut. It's slavery dressed up in legal paperwork, and it's happening right under our noses because nobody wants to admit that civilized society can be just as brutal as the worst outlaw." Cole felt sick. "What can I do?" "File for guardianship, like you planned. I'll help with the paperwork and I'll use my connections to push it through as fast as possible. But Cole, you need to understand, that could take weeks, maybe months. And Black won't wait that long." "Then what?" Eleanor leaned forward, her eyes hard. "Then you prepare for a fight. Because he's going to come for those children, and he's going to use the law to do it. You need witnesses, documentation, proof that you're providing adequate care, testimony from reputable citizens. Build a case so strong that when he does come, you have ammunition to fight back." "Will that be enough?" "Honestly, I don't know. Black's got resources, connections, money. He's got the territorial government convinced he's doing God's work. But if we can expose what he really is, if we can prove that those children are better off with you," she paused. "It's a chance. Better than no chance at all." Cole stood. "Then let's get started." Over the next week, Cole worked harder than he'd ever worked in his life. He documented everything: meals provided, clothes mended, medical care given. He had Dr. Morrison come out to examine all 8 children, paying the man extra to write detailed reports on their improving health. He convinced the circuit preacher to visit and attest that the children were receiving moral instruction. He got 3 neighboring ranchers to sign statements vouching for his character. Eleanor worked her connections, filing paperwork, writing letters, calling in favors from judges and territorial officials who owed her money or respect or both. She even contacted a lawyer in Cheyenne who agreed to take the case pro bono once he heard what Black was really doing. But none of it happened fast enough. On the 8th day after Black's visit, Cole was repairing a section of fence when he saw the dust cloud. Multiple riders moving fast coming from town. He dropped his tools and ran for the house. "Nora, get everyone inside, now!" The children scattered like startled birds, recognizing the urgency in his voice. Cole grabbed his rifle from above the door, checked the loads, and positioned himself on the porch as 7 riders came into the yard. Sheriff Crowley led them, with Silas Black beside him in his buggy. The other 5 were deputies, or men dressed like deputies anyway, hard-eyed men who wore their guns like they knew how to use them. Crowley reined in and smiled that politician's smile. "Morning, Cole. We need to talk. Talk from there. You're not coming any closer. Now, is that any way to greet the law?" Crowley's hand rested casually on his gun belt. "I've got a court order here signed by Judge Pemberton. It gives Mr. Black temporary custody of those 8 children for evaluation and proper placement." "Let me see it." Crowley walked his horse forward and handed over the document. Cole read it quickly. It looked official, bore what appeared to be the judge's signature, and gave Black authority to remove the children pending investigation into their living conditions and the suitability of their current guardian. This is dated 3 days ago. Official paperwork takes time to process. "You've been sitting on this, waiting for the right moment." Crowley shrugged. "Now, you can make this easy or hard, Cole. Easy way, you let Mr. Black evaluate the children, they get placed in appropriate homes, and everybody goes about their business. Hard way." He gestured at the deputies. "Well, I'd hate for things to get unpleasant." And inside the house, Cole could hear the children's frightened whispers. He thought about Nora's fierce protectiveness, about Wen's gentle strength, about Samuel's quiet dignity, about Lily's silent trust. He thought about the life they'd started to build here, the healing that had barely begun. And he made a choice. "No." Crowley's smile faded. "Excuse me?" "I said no, you're not taking them. I have a legal court order. You have a piece of paper that might be legitimate or might be forged. Either way, I'm filing a challenge to it. My lawyer in Cheyenne has already submitted the paperwork." That was a bluff. The lawyer had only started the process, but Crowley didn't know that. "Until that challenge is resolved, those children stay with me." Black climbed down from his buggy, his face flushed with anger. "This is obstruction of justice, Harland. The sheriff can arrest you right now." "On what charge? Caring for orphans nobody else wanted? Feeding and housing children who were dying in the heat? You want to arrest me for that, Sheriff? You go right ahead, but those kids don't leave with you." The deputies shifted in their saddles, hands drifting toward their guns. The air went tight and dangerous, that electric feeling before violence breaks loose. Then a voice cut through the tension. "He's not alone." Eleanor Caldwell rode into the yard from the direction of her ranch, accompanied by 4 of her ranch hands, all armed, all watching the deputies with hard eyes. She positioned her horse beside Cole's porch. "Mrs. Caldwell," Crowley said carefully, "this doesn't concern you. Those children were dying when Cole found them. Now they're healthy, educated, and cared for. That concerns me." She pulled a document from her saddlebag. "This is a notarized statement from Dr. Morrison attesting to the children's improved health under Mr. Harland's care. I also have statements from 3 ordained ministers, 2 territorial officials, and Judge Pemberton's clerk, who happens to be my nephew, stating that the court order you're carrying was issued without proper review and is under formal challenge." Crowley's jaw tightened. "That doesn't change the fact that I have legal authority to evaluate the situation, not to forcibly remove children from a stable home without due process." Eleanor's voice went cold as January ice. "You try to take those kids today, Rex, and I promise you'll be explaining your actions to the territorial marshal by sundown. I've already sent a rider to Cheyenne with a full report on Silas Black's operation. You want to dig yourself deeper into this hole? You go right ahead." For a long moment, nobody moved. 7 men with guns faced Cole, Eleanor, and her 4 ranch hands. The children watched from the windows, silent and terrified. The summer sun beat down, and somewhere a crow called, harsh and mocking. Finally, Black spoke, his voice tight with barely controlled fury. "This isn't over. We'll be back with proper documentation, proper authority, and there won't be anything you can do to stop us." "Maybe," Eleanor said, "but you're not taking them today." Crowley stared at Cole for a long moment, his eyes promising violence later, then wheeled his horse around. "Let's go." They rode out in a cloud of dust and frustrated anger, leaving Cole and Eleanor standing in the yard with adrenaline still singing through their veins. "Thank you," Cole managed. "Don't thank me yet. We bought time, nothing more." Eleanor dismounted, handed her reins to one of her men. Black meant what he said. He'll be back, and next time he'll come prepared. The door opened and the children spilled out, led by Nora. She looked at Eleanor, then at Cole, then at the dust cloud disappearing toward town. "How long do we have?" she asked, that terrible adult practicality in a child's voice. "I don't know," Cole admitted. "Few days. Maybe a week. Then we should run. Take what we can carry and head for the mountains. They can't find us if we keep moving." "No." Cole knelt down so he was eye level with her. "No more running, Nora. We fight this the right way. With law, with truth, with people standing beside us. We make them see that you belong here. And if they don't see it? If they take us anyway?" Cole had no answer to that. So instead he did what he'd been doing for 8 days. He gathered the children close, led them back inside, and started preparing dinner. Because sometimes the only thing you could do was keep moving forward, keep doing the next right thing, and trust that eventually it would be enough. But that night, lying awake and listening to 8 children sleep under his roof, Cole Harlan knew the truth. The storm wasn't over. It had barely begun. The dawn came too early, with heat already building before the sun fully cleared the horizon. Cole had been awake for hours, sitting on the porch with coffee gone cold in his cup, watching the road for dust clouds that would signal trouble coming. His rifle leaned against the rail within easy reach, and every nerve in his body felt stretched tight as fence wire. Inside, he could hear the children stirring. Nora's voice, quiet but firm, organizing the morning routine. Water being pumped. The clatter of dishes. Life continuing because it had to, because children needed breakfast and routine and something that felt like normal even when the world was falling apart around them. Eleanor's ranch hands had stayed the night, bedding down in the barn, their presence a comfort, but also a reminder of how precarious everything had become. You didn't need armed guards unless you expected violence. Patrick emerged first, rubbing sleep from his eyes, his red hair sticking up in all directions. He'd grown half an inch in the past week, seemed to be unfolding now that he had regular meals. The haunted look was fading from his eyes, replaced by something that might eventually become childhood again if they could just hold on long enough. "Mr. Harland? Sir?" The boy hesitated on the porch. "Is it true what Nora said, that men might come to take us away?" Cole set down his coffee cup. There was no point in lying to children who'd already seen the worst the world had to offer. "They might try, and you'll stop them." "I'll try." Patrick was quiet for a moment, studying the horizon like he could see the future written there. "My da used to say that trying was just another word for failing slow. He said either you do a thing or you don't, and all the trying in the world don't change the outcome." "Your da ever tell you what to do when the odds were stacked against you?" "He said you stand anyway, even if you know you're going to lose, because some things are worth losing for." The boy's voice cracked slightly. "He stood up to the landlord who was evicting us, got himself killed for it, but he stood." Cole looked at this 9-year-old boy carrying the weight of his father's death and felt something fierce and protective surge in his chest. "Then we'll stand together, all of us, and maybe we'll find that the odds aren't as bad as they look." Patrick nodded and went to start his chores, and Cole watched him go, thinking about men who stood against impossible odds and the children who remembered them for it. The day crawled past with excruciating slowness. Cole kept the children close, no one wandering far from the house. He worked on small repairs near the barn, always within sight of the main building, always aware of the road and the angles of approach. Eleanor's men took turns on watch, scanning the horizon with the practiced eyes of men who'd fought in range wars and knew the look of trouble coming. Around noon, a rider appeared, just one, moving at an easy pace that suggested he wasn't bringing immediate danger. Cole recognized him as Tom Morrison, the young clerk from the general store, and felt some of the tension ease from his shoulders. Tom reined in and climbed down, wiping sweat from his face. "Mr. Harland, Mrs. Caldwell asked me to bring you word. The territorial marshal arrived in Cheyenne this morning. He's reviewing the case now. How long before we hear something?" "Could be days, could be weeks. The marshal's got a full docket, and there's questions about jurisdiction, whether this falls under territorial authority or local oversight." Tom pulled an envelope from his saddlebag. "Mrs. Caldwell also sent this. Letters from families in 3 different counties offering to testify on your behalf. Character witnesses. People willing to swear you're fit to care for these children. Cole took the envelope, feeling the weight of other people's faith in him. Tell her I'm grateful. There's something else. Tom's voice dropped lower. Sheriff Crowley's been asking questions around town. About your finances, your property, whether you've got debts that might make you desperate. He's building a case that you took in these kids for the government subsidies. What subsidies? Exactly. There aren't any, but that won't stop him from claiming you're misusing funds that don't exist. Tom glanced toward the house where the children's faces appeared in windows. He's also been talking to folks about unnatural situations and moral impropriety, making it sound like something ugly's happening here. Cole's hands tightened on the envelope. People believe that? Some do, others don't, but it's the kind of talk that sticks, gets people wondering, even when they know better. Tom mounted his horse again. Mrs. Caldwell said to tell you she's working on it, getting ahead of the gossip. But you should be prepared. This is going to get worse before it gets better. He rode off, leaving Cole standing in the yard with a fistful of letters and a new understanding of how Crowley planned to fight this battle. Not with guns and force, not yet, but with whispers and insinuation, poisoning the well of public opinion until no one would stand beside a man accused of such things. That evening, Nora found him in the barn, ostensibly checking on the horses, but really just needing a moment away from 8 pairs of watching eyes. The others are scared, she said without preamble, leaning on her crutch in the doorway. They're trying not to show it, but they are, even when, and she never shows anything. I know. Lily asked me today if you were going to send us back. She didn't use words, she never does, but she pointed at the road and then at herself, and the question was clear enough. Nora's voice wavered. I told her no. Was I lying? Cole turned to face her fully. I meant what I said. I'm not giving you up without a fight. But what if the fight's not enough? What if they come with more men, more guns, more legal papers that say we have to go? She straightened her shoulders, and he saw the little general emerging again, the girl who dragged herself across a cabin floor to protect children who weren't her blood. I need to know what to do if that happens. I need a plan. The plan is to trust that the law will work the way it's supposed to. The law didn't work for my parents. They were good people, hardworking people, and the law let the factory owner work them to death and call it legal. The law didn't work for Wen's family when they were forced onto a reservation. Didn't work for Samuel's mother when she was sold away from him, even though the war supposedly ended all that. Nora's eyes were fierce and wet. The law works for people like Sheriff Crowley and Mr. Black. It doesn't work for people like us. Cole had no answer to that because she was right. The law was supposed to be blind, supposed to protect the vulnerable, but in practice it protected whoever had the most money and power and connections. He'd seen it before, lived through it when Sarah died because the nearest doctor wouldn't come out to a poor rancher's wife in time to save her. Then we'll make it work, he said finally. Or we'll break it trying. 2 more days passed in tense quiet. Cole rode to town for more supplies and found the atmosphere changed. People who'd been friendly now avoiding his eyes, conversation stopping when he walked past. Mrs. Palmer served him with pursed lips and disapproval radiating from every gesture. Even Doc Morrison, who'd examined the children and written glowing reports, seemed uncomfortable when Cole tried to thank him. Crowley's poison was working. On the 3rd day, Cole was teaching the twins how to properly maintain a saddle when he heard hoofbeats, multiple riders, coming fast. His stomach dropped. This was it then. Whatever was coming, it was here. But the riders who appeared weren't Crowley's deputies. They were ranchers, townspeople, faces Cole recognized from church and market and the occasional social gathering. 20 of them at least, led by a grizzled cattleman named Henry Ashford, who owned the spread north of Eleanor's place. Cole stood slowly, hand near his gun, not sure if this was help or a different kind of threat. Ashford reined in and dismounted, his weathered face unreadable. Harland, we need to talk. I'm listening. Heard what Crowley's been saying. Heard what Silas Black's planning. Ashford spat in the dust. Also heard what Eleanor Caldwell's been saying about what really happened with those kids, about how you found them dying and saved their lives. That's the truth of it. We figured. Ashford gestured at the riders behind him. Most of us got kids of our own. Some of us got orphans we took in after the war, after the fever years, after whatever tragedy left children alone. We know what it looks like when a man's doing right by kids who need help. He paused. And we know what it looks like when someone's trying to profit off misery. Another rider spoke up. A woman Cole didn't know, wearing men's clothes and sitting her horse like she'd been born to it. I lost my daughter to one of Black's work programs 3 years back. Said he was placing her with a good family in Denver. Found out later she'd been sold to a brothel, died of disease before she turned 15. Her voice was steady, but her eyes burned. I've been waiting for a chance to bring that bastard down. This might be it. One by one, the others spoke. Stories of children lost to Black's operation, of families torn apart by legal maneuvering, of corruption ignored because it was easier not to look. And underneath all of it, a thread of determination. That this time, with these children, things would be different. We're here to offer support, Ashford said finally. Whatever you need. Testimony, supplies, protection, if it comes to that. Eleanor's been working the legal angle, but sometimes the legal angle needs backing from folks willing to stand in person. Cole felt something ease in his chest. Not relief, not yet, but maybe hope. I appreciate it. More than I can say. Don't appreciate it yet. We're also here to tell you that Crowley's planning something big, soon. Word is Black got himself a judge from back east, someone who doesn't know the territory and doesn't care to learn, willing to sign whatever papers Black puts in front of him. Ashford's expression darkened. Could be coming any day now? As if summoned by the words, dust appeared on the southern road. More riders moving with purpose. Ashford saw them and swore softly. That's probably them now. Get the children inside, Cole called to Nora, who was watching from the porch. She didn't argue, just herded the others into the house with quick efficiency. The riders resolved into a larger group than before, Crowley and his deputies, Silas Black and his buggy, and a thin man in a black suit who had to be the Eastern judge. Behind them came a wagon, empty but ominous in its implications. A wagon to carry children away. Crowley's smile was triumphant as he reined in and surveyed the assembled ranchers. Well now, looks like we've got ourselves a situation. Mr. Harland, this is Judge Ambrose Whitfield, recently appointed to the Territorial Circuit Court. He's here to resolve this matter once and for all. Whitfield dismounted stiffly, clearly uncomfortable on horseback, and pulled a document from his case. His voice was high and nasal, with an accent that placed him somewhere in the northeast. I've reviewed the case file provided by Mr. Black and Sheriff Crowley. The evidence is clear. These children are wards of the state, improperly removed from authorized care, and subject to immediate return to proper supervision. Those children were dying, Cole said flatly. Their chaperone was dead. I saved their lives. A commendable impulse, but legally irrelevant. You had no authority to take custody. Whitfield adjusted his spectacles. Furthermore, allegations have been raised regarding the appropriateness of your living arrangements. A single man with 8 children, no female supervision, questions of moral fitness. That's horseshit, and you know it, Ashford cut in. Cole Harlan's about the most upright man in this territory. You want to question someone's moral fitness, start with the man selling children to whorehouses and calling it charity work. Black's face went red. How dare you? How dare I? The woman who'd lost her daughter urged her horse forward. You killed my Sarah. Sold her like livestock and pocketed the money. How many others, Black? How many children have you trafficked? These are baseless accusations from clearly biased sources, Whitfield said, though he looked uncomfortable. The law is clear. The law is whatever you make it. Eleanor Caldwell's voice rang out as she rode into the yard, accompanied by another man Cole didn't recognize. Judge Whitfield, I'd like you to meet Daniel Warren, federal prosecutor from the Department of Justice. He's been investigating Mr. Black's operation for 6 months. Warren was a compact man with steel gray hair and eyes that could cut glass. He dismounted and approached Whitfield with the confidence of someone who held all the cards and knew it. Judge Whitfield, any orders you issue in this matter will be subject to immediate federal review. We have evidence of child trafficking, fraud, corruption of public officials, and conspiracy crossing state and territorial lines. This case falls under federal jurisdiction, which supersedes your authority. He produced his own document. This is a temporary restraining order preventing the removal of these children pending investigation. It's been signed by the territorial marshal and carries the full weight of federal law. Whitfield's face went pale. Crowley's hand drifted toward his gun, then stopped when he saw Eleanor's ranch hands doing the same. Black stood in his buggy, his polished veneer cracking. "This is absurd. I've done nothing illegal. I help children. You sell them." Warren's voice was cold. "We have bank records showing payments to Sheriff Crowley. We have testimony from families who paid you placement fees that went straight into your pocket. We have a witness who escaped from one of your work programs and is willing to testify about conditions that amount to slavery." He looked at Crowley. "We also have evidence that you've been receiving monthly payments from Black's operation. That's corruption, Sheriff. Federal offense. Carries serious prison time." The yard went silent, except for the wind and the nervous shifting of horses. Crowley's hand was still near his gun, his face twisted with calculation. Cole could see him weighing options, deciding whether to fight or fold. Then Lily screamed. The sound ripped through the tension like a knife, high, terrified, absolute. Cole spun toward the house and saw smoke curling from the barn, thin tendrils that were already thickening into something worse. "Fire!" Patrick's voice, panicked, from inside the structure. Cole ran. Behind him, he heard shouts, confusion, but all he could think about was Patrick in the barn, the horses trapped in their stalls, and 8 children who'd already survived too much to die in flames now. The smoke was thick inside, acrid and choking. He could see flames licking up the far wall where the hay was stored. Someone had set this deliberately, probably during the confrontation in the yard while everyone's attention was elsewhere. "Patrick!" Cole shouted. "Here!" The boy emerged from a stall leading a panicked horse. "I got 3 out, 2 more inside." "Get clear. I'll get them. But go!" Patrick ran for the door as Cole plunged deeper into the smoke. His eyes watered, his lungs burned, but he found the first horse and got it moving, slapping its rump to send it galloping toward safety. The second was more panicked, rearing and screaming, and it took precious seconds to calm it enough to lead it out. By the time he emerged, coughing and half blind, the fire had spread to the roof. Flames roared into the summer sky, and people were running with buckets from the well, a futile effort against an inferno that had been expertly set to burn fast and hot. And in the yard, Crowley had his gun drawn. "Nobody moves," the sheriff said, his voice tight with desperation. "This is still a legal matter, and I'm still the law here." Warren faced him calmly, despite the weapon pointed at his chest. "Put the gun away, Sheriff. It's over." "It's not over until I say it's over. Those kids are coming with us. The fire's proof that Harlan can't protect them." "You set that fire!" Eleanor's voice cut like a whip. "Or had one of your men do it. Arson, destruction of property, attempted murder if anyone had died." Crowley's eyes darted wildly. Behind him, his deputies were backing away, hands raised, wanting no part of what was about to happen. Black was climbing into his buggy, preparing to run. "You're not taking them," Cole said, stepping forward despite the gun. His barn was burning, his livelihood going up in smoke, but all he could think about was 8 children watching from the house windows. "You'll have to shoot me first, and there's 20 witnesses here who'll testify that you murdered an unarmed man in cold blood." For a long moment, Crowley's finger tightened on the trigger. Cole could see the calculation in his eyes. Whether pulling it was worth the consequences, whether his corruption and desperation had pushed him far enough to commit murder in front of this many people. Then Nora's voice rang out, clear and carrying. "Lily's hurt!" Everyone turned. The little girl stood on the porch, held by Nora, and even from across the yard, Cole could see she was shaking violently. The screams had stopped, but her eyes were wide and unseeing, lost in whatever terror the fire and smoke had triggered in her damaged mind. Wen was there too, and Samuel and the twins all clustered around their smallest member trying to comfort her. And Cole saw in that moment exactly what Black and Crowley saw. Children who cared for each other, who'd formed their own family out of shared trauma and survival, who wouldn't be easily separated or sold off like livestock. Children who were people, not property. Warren moved with surprising speed, closing the distance to Crowley, and twisting the gun from his hand before the sheriff could react. "You're under arrest, federal custody, corruption, arson, conspiracy, and about a dozen other charges I'll think of on the ride to Cheyenne." Crowley sagged, all the fight draining out of him. Black tried to run then, snapping the reins of his buggy, but Ashford's men blocked the road. He lasted maybe 10 seconds before they pulled him down from his seat, his fine clothes dusty and his face pale with fear. The barn burned itself out over the next hour, while the ranchers worked to keep the fire from spreading to the house. Cole barely noticed. He was on the porch with Lily, holding her while she shook, whispering that she was safe, that no one was going to take her, that the fire was outside and she was inside, and everything was going to be all right. Gradually, the shaking eased. Lily's eyes focused, found his face, and something that might have been recognition flickered there. Her hand clutched his shirt with surprising strength, and though she still didn't speak, the terror receded enough that she could breathe normally again. Nora stood beside them, her hand on Lily's shoulder, her face streaked with tears she was trying hard to hide. "Is it really over?" she asked quietly. Cole looked across the yard where Warren was binding Crowley's hands, where Black sat in the dust with 2 ranchers guarding him, where Eleanor was giving orders and organizing people and making sure the legal aftermath would be handled properly. "The fighting part might be," he said, "but there's still the waiting, the legal process, making sure it sticks. And if it doesn't?" He pulled her close with his free arm, this fierce, broken girl who'd protected 7 other children with nothing but determination and love. "Then we'll figure something else out, together, all of us." The barn was a total loss, just a skeleton of blackened beams and ash where his hay and tools and tack had been. But the children were safe. The threat was gone. And standing in the yard with the smell of smoke still thick in the air, Cole felt something he hadn't felt in 3 years. Hope. The smoke still hung in the air 3 hours later, a gray pall that drifted across the yard and stung the eyes. Cole stood in front of the barn's charred skeleton, looking at what had been his livelihood reduced to ash and blackened timber. The summer sun was setting now, painting everything in shades of orange and red that made the destruction look even worse, like the fire was still burning in memory if not in fact. Eleanor approached from behind, her boots crunching on debris. "Could have been worse, could have spread to the house, could have killed someone." "Could have," Cole agreed. His voice sounded hollow even to himself. "Insurance won't cover arson if they can prove it was set deliberately to target you specifically, rather than random vandalism." She said it matter-of-factly, the way she said most things, not cruel but not sugarcoating either. "You're looking at rebuilding from scratch, lumber, nails, labor. Months' work at least, probably 2. Cole knew all this already, had been calculating costs in his head while holding Lily, while watching Warren haul Crowley away in irons, while the ranchers beat back flames with wet burlap and grim determination. The barn had held his hay stores for winter, his tack, his tools, equipment that had taken years to accumulate and couldn't be easily replaced. The financial hit would be devastating for a man already stretched thin, feeding 8 extra mouths. "I'll manage," he said. "You will, because tomorrow morning, 20 men are showing up with lumber and hammers, and we're going to rebuild this thing before the week's out." Eleanor's tone brooked no argument. "Henry's donating the timber from his north stand. The Johnsons are bringing nails. Peterson's got roofing material he's not using, and every man here owes you for standing up to Black and Crowley when the rest of us were too comfortable or too scared to make waves." Cole turned to look at her. "I didn't do it for gratitude. I know. You did it because a bunch of kids needed help, and you're too stubborn to walk away from people who need you. That's exactly why folks want to help now." She gestured at the house where lamplight glowed in the windows. "Those children in there, they're not just yours anymore, Cole. They're ours. This whole territory's. What happened here today? What almost happened? It shamed us. Made us look at ourselves and see how close we came to letting evil win because it wore a badge and carried legal papers. Eleanor, let me finish. You gave us a chance to be better than we were, to stand for something that mattered. That barn burning is on Crowley, but it could have just as easily been on all of us for our silence, our comfort, our willingness to look away." Her eyes were fierce in the fading light. "So tomorrow we rebuild, not because you need charity, but because we need to prove to ourselves that we're the people we claim to be." Before Cole could respond, Daniel Warren walked up, his suit dusty and his expression weary but satisfied. Crowley's headed to Cheyenne under guard. Black too. I've got enough evidence to prosecute both of them, plus about a dozen of Black's associates once we track them down. This operation ran deeper than just Wyoming. We're talking children trafficked across 5 territories. What happens to the kids he already placed? Cole asked. We're working on it. Tracking down the locations, interviewing the children who are old enough to testify, bringing charges where warranted. Warren's expression darkened. Some we won't be able to save. Some died before we even knew to look. But going forward at least, Black won't be destroying any more lives. It was cold comfort, knowing that children had suffered and died while the legal system looked the other way or actively facilitated the abuse. But it was something. A crack in the armor of corruption, a precedent that might prevent future atrocities. What about the guardianship? Cole asked. The legal status of my kids? Warren pulled a folded document from his jacket. Judge Whitfield signed this before he left. Emergency guardianship, effective immediately, with a recommendation for permanent status pending a formal hearing in 6 weeks. Given the circumstances, the corruption, the attempted illegal seizure, the clear evidence that the children are thriving in your care, I don't anticipate any problems. Cole took the paper with hands that trembled slightly. Legal guardianship. Not permanent yet, but real enough that no one could simply take the children away on a whim or a forged court order. It was protection, official and binding, the kind that would stand up to scrutiny. There's one more thing, Warren continued. I need testimony from the children, formal statements about what happened with Black's operation, what they witnessed, what was done to them. I know it's asking a lot. They've been through enough already, but their testimony could be crucial to the prosecution. Cole thought about Nora's fierce protectiveness, about Lily's fragile healing, about all 8 children who'd barely started to feel safe and were now being asked to relive trauma for the benefit of strangers. I'll ask them, he said. But if they say no, that's final. I won't force them. Fair enough? Warren shook his hand. I'll be back in a week to take statements from anyone willing. In the meantime, try to get some rest. You've earned it. He rode off toward town, and Cole stood alone in the gathering darkness, looking at the ruins of his barn and the light in his house windows and trying to reconcile the two, loss and gain, destruction and salvation, endings and beginnings all tangled together. Inside, the children had settled into the evening routine Nora had established over the past weeks. Dishes were being washed, lessons were being reviewed, Mary was reading aloud from a primer while the twins listened with fierce concentration. Patrick was helping Wen prepare vegetables for tomorrow's breakfast. Samuel sat in the corner, working on arithmetic problems with the dogged determination of someone who'd decided education was his path to freedom. And Lily sat beside the window, her rag doll in her lap, watching Cole through the glass. When he came inside, she didn't run to him. Lily didn't do things like that, her trust still too fragile for spontaneous affection. But her eyes followed him, and when he sat down, she moved closer, perching on the edge of the chair beside him. Not touching, but present. It was progress. Nora approached with 2 cups of coffee, handed him one, and sat down across the table. Patrick told me what happened. With the gun. Sheriff pointing it at you. Patrick talks too much. Patrick saw a man willing to die to protect us. That's not something to keep quiet about. She sipped her coffee, studying him over the rim. The others are scared still. They don't understand why someone would burn your barn, why men with guns and papers keep trying to take us away. They think maybe we're cursed, that bad things follow us wherever we go. That's not true. Isn't it? Nora's voice was steady, but her eyes were haunted. Miss Abigail died trying to save us. Your barn burned because you took us in. Men threatened you, pointed guns at you, tried to arrest you. We bring trouble, Mr. Harland. We always have. That's why nobody wanted us in the first place. Cole set down his coffee and leaned forward, meeting her eyes directly. Listen to me, Nora. What happened today, that wasn't because of you. That was because bad men were profiting from hurting children, and when someone finally stood up to them, they lashed out. The barn burning, the threats, all of it. That's on Crowley and Black, not on 8 kids who never did anything except survive when the world tried to kill them. But if you weren't here, I'd still be living alone in this house, half dead inside, going through the motions of life without actually living, You think you brought me trouble. You brought me purpose. You brought me a reason to get up in the morning that isn't just habit. You brought me back to life." His voice roughened. "So don't you dare apologize for existing. Don't you dare think you're anything but the best thing that's happened to me in 3 years." Nora's eyes filled with tears she was too proud to let fall. She nodded once, sharply, and stood up. "I'll tell the others. About the guardianship papers. About Mr. Warren coming back. About rebuilding the barn." She paused at the doorway. "Thank you for everything, for finding us, for keeping us, for not giving up. Thank you for letting me." She managed to smile and disappeared into the other room, and Cole heard her gathering the children, her voice calm and steady as she explained what was happening, what it meant, why they could finally start to believe they were safe. Lily remained beside him, still silent, still watching. Cole wondered what went on behind those enormous brown eyes, what memories haunted her, what words she might speak if she could find the courage or the healing required to use her voice again. "You don't have to talk," he said quietly. "Not ever, if you don't want to. You're enough just as you are, Lily, exactly as you are." She blinked slowly, processing this, then did something she'd never done before. She reached out and took his hand, her small fingers wrapping around his calloused palm. Didn't say anything, didn't need to. The touch said everything. They sat like that until full dark fell, and Cole felt something he'd thought died with Sarah. The fierce protective love of a parent for a child. The bone-deep certainty that he would burn down the world before he let anyone hurt this little girl or any of the others sleeping under his roof. Morning came with the sound of wagons and voices. True to Eleanor's word, the ranchers arrived before the sun was fully up, bringing lumber and tools and a determination that bordered on grim satisfaction. 20 men became 30 by mid-morning, then 40 by noon. Women came too, bringing food and water and organizing the children to stay safely clear of the construction. Henry Ashford took charge of the actual building with the confidence of a man who'd raised a dozen barns over a long lifetime. He directed men to clear the debris, lay new foundation posts, begin framing walls with swift efficiency that came from years of practice. Cole worked alongside them, grateful for the physical labor that kept his hands busy and his mind from dwelling on everything that could still go wrong. Patrick worked too, carrying nails and boards, learning carpentry from men who taught with gruff kindness. The twins hauled water. Samuel helped organize materials despite being half the size of most workers. And Nora oversaw it all from the porch, her crutch beside her, calling out warnings when someone got too close to the children, or when lunch was ready, or when someone needed bandages for minor cuts and scrapes. She'd appointed herself quartermaster and took the job seriously, making sure everyone stayed fed and hydrated and safe. By evening, the basic structure stood. Walls framed, roof beams in place, enough completed that it looked like a barn again instead of a pile of ash. The men worked by lamplight for another hour, determined to make as much progress as possible, and when they finally quit for the night, exhausted and satisfied, the barn was more than halfway finished. 2 more days like this, Henry declared, accepting coffee from Wen with a nod of thanks, and you'll have a barn better than the one that burned. Stronger foundation, better drainage, room for expansion if you need it. "I don't know how to thank you all," Cole said, looking at the assembled crowd of neighbors and strangers who'd become allies. "Don't thank us. Just keep doing right by those kids." Henry gestured at the house where the children watched from windows. "They're worth fighting for, worth building for. You showed us that. Now we're just returning the favor." The work continued for 3 more days. Men came and went in shifts, fitting the construction around their own ranch duties, but there was always a crew working, always progress being made. Women brought meals, mended clothes, taught the children songs and games. The ranch became a gathering place, a community project, proof that when people chose to care, they could accomplish remarkable things. On the 4th day, the barn was finished. New wood, strong and sturdy, smelling of pine and possibility. Larger than the old one, with better ventilation and stalls designed for safety. The men stood back and admired their work with the quiet satisfaction of craftsmen who'd built something that would last. That evening, after everyone had left and the ranch was quiet again, Cole walked through the new barn with the children, showed them where the horses would live, where the hay would be stored, where tools would hang. Patrick ran his hands along the stall doors, testing the latches. Wen examined the hayloft ladder with approval. The twins investigated every corner with the boundless curiosity of 8-year-olds. Nora stood in the center of the space, turning slowly, taking it all in. "People did this for us," she said wonderingly. "Built this for us. Because they cared. Because you matter," Cole corrected. "Because what happens to you matters to them." "I've never—" She stopped, struggling with words. "We've never been worth this much to anyone before. Never been worth the effort. You are now, and you always were. You just needed people to see it." Samuel approached Cole hesitantly, his dark eyes serious. "Mr. Warren wants us to talk about what happened, about Mr. Black and the people who hurt us." His voice dropped. "Do we have to?" Cole crouched down to his level. "No. You don't have to do anything that makes you uncomfortable. But if you want to help make sure Black never hurts another child, talking about what happened might do that. It's your choice, though. All of you get to choose." "What if I remember wrong? What if I say something that's not exactly true because I was scared and it's all mixed up in my head?" "Then you tell Mr. Warren that. Tell him you were scared, that memory's fuzzy, that you're doing your best. That's all anyone can ask." Samuel nodded slowly, thinking this over. "I'll do it, if it helps. If it keeps other kids from—" He didn't finish, but the haunted look in his eyes said enough. One by one, over the next hour, the children made their choices. Some would testify, some wouldn't. Lily obviously couldn't, and Mary's cough had kept her too sick to remember much from the worst days. But Nora, Wen, Samuel, Patrick, and one of the twins, David, it turned out, they were willing to speak. "We'll do it together," Nora declared. "All of us in the same room. Mr. Warren can ask questions, we'll answer, but we stay together. That's the deal." Cole agreed to relay the terms, and when Warren returned a week later with a court stenographer and a careful, gentle manner, that's exactly how it happened. The 5 children sat in the main room, hands linked, and told their stories. They spoke of the orphan train, of being evaluated like livestock, of the casual cruelty of adults who saw them as problems to be solved rather than people to be helped. They spoke of Miss Abigail's kindness and her death, of the men who'd robbed them, of the heat and thirst and certainty they would die alone in that cabin. Wen spoke of her family's forced removal, of watching her mother die on the trail west, of being told her heritage made her unsuitable for placement with good Christian families. Samuel talked about being separated from his mother when he was 3, of learning that his skin color meant most people would never see him as fully human. Patrick described his father's death, the poverty that followed, the orphanage that treated children like prisoners. And Nora told them about her leg, twisted since birth, and about standing in train stations while families examined her like broken merchandise and walked away. About Miss Abigail promising to find them all homes, about her desperate attempt to save them, about watching from the cabin as she disappeared into the heat. Warren took notes, asked clarifying questions, treated each child with a respect and gravity that made it clear their words mattered. The stenographer's pen scratched across paper, recording testimony that would be used to dismantle Black's operation and put corrupt men in prison. When it was done, the children looked exhausted but also lighter somehow, as if speaking the truth aloud had released some of the weight they'd been carrying. "You did good," Warren told them. "All of you. What you've given me today, it's going to save lives. Other children who might have ended up in Black's hands, they'll be safe now because you were brave enough to speak." "Is he going to jail?" Nora asked. "For real? Not just until he can pay someone off or find a crooked judge?" "For real. Federal prison, multiple counts, evidence so solid even the best lawyer couldn't wiggle him free. He's done, Nora. Finished." She nodded, satisfied, and the tension that had lived in her shoulders for as long as Cole had known her eased fractionally. The next few weeks passed in a rhythm that felt almost normal. Cole filed the permanent guardianship paperwork, accompanied by letters from Eleanor, Henry, Doc Morrison, and 24 other citizens attesting to his character and the children's well-being. The hearing was scheduled for late August, but Warren assured him it was a formality. The emergency guardianship was solid, and given the circumstances, no judge would overturn it. The children settled deeper into ranch life. Patrick became Cole's shadow, learning horses and cattle with the dedication of someone who'd found his calling. Wen's garden flourished under her patient care, producing vegetables that improved every meal. The twins developed a system for the daily chores that was so efficient, Cole sometimes wondered how he'd managed before. Samuel devoured every book in the house and started borrowing from Eleanor's extensive library. Mary's cough finally cleared completely in the dry air, and she discovered a talent for sewing, mending clothes, and fashioning new ones from fabric the rancher women donated. Nora continued running the household with calm efficiency, her limp less pronounced now that she had a properly fitted crutch and wasn't constantly malnourished. And Lily remained silent, but she bloomed in other ways. She followed Cole everywhere, her small shadow, watching and learning, and slowly learning to trust that this place was real and permanent. She helped in the garden, played with a kitten one of the ranchers brought by, sat on the porch in the evenings with her rag doll and watched the sunset paint the sky in colors that seemed impossible. One evening in late July, as Cole was closing up the barn for the night, he heard footsteps behind him. He turned to find Lily standing there, backlit by the dying sun, her doll clutched in one hand. She opened her mouth, closed it, tried again. Her face screwed up with effort, with the monumental task of forcing words through vocal cords that had been silent for months. Finally, in a whisper so quiet he almost missed it, she spoke. Safe. One word. Just one. But it carried the weight of everything, all the fear, all the trauma, all the long journey from certain death in a cabin to this moment in the summer twilight. Safe. The only word that mattered. Cole's vision blurred. He crouched down, and Lily walked into his arms, letting herself be held for the first time, her thin body trembling but trusting. Yes, he managed. You're safe. All of you. I promise. She nodded against his chest, and though she didn't speak again that night, the barrier had been broken. The healing had begun in earnest. Inside the house, dinner was ready. Nora called everyone to the table, and they gathered as they had every night for weeks now. A family forged not from blood, but from choice, from survival, from the simple act of showing up for each other when the world said they didn't matter. Cole looked around the table at 8 faces that had become as familiar as his own heartbeat, and felt Sarah's absence less keenly than he had in years. Not because he'd forgotten her, he never would, but because grief no longer defined him. These children had given him something to live for beyond mere existence, had pulled him back from the edge of despair he hadn't even realized he'd been standing on. Tomorrow, the guardianship hearing would be finalized. Tomorrow they would officially, legally become his children and he their father. But tonight, in this moment, with lamplight warm and voices raised in conversation and laughter threading through the words, Cole Harlan knew a truth that needed no legal papers to validate it. He was already home. They all were. And nothing, not corrupt sheriffs or child traffickers or barns burning or legal complications, would ever change that again. The guardianship hearing took place on a Thursday morning in late August, when the heat had finally broken and the first hints of autumn touched the air with coolness that felt like mercy after the brutal summer. Cole dressed in his best shirt, the one Sarah had made him 4 years ago, that still fit well enough despite the weight he'd lost, and then regained over the months. The children wore clothes the rancher women had sewn for them, simple but clean and proper, each child looking more like themselves than the hollow-eyed ghosts he'd found dying in that cabin. They rode to Cheyenne in 2 wagons, Cole's and Eleanor's, with the children chattering nervously about what would happen, what they'd need to say, whether the judge would be kind or cruel. Lily sat pressed against Cole's side, silent as always, except for that one precious word she'd spoken weeks ago, but her hand gripped his with fierce determination. What if he says no? Nora asked from the back of the wagon, voicing the fear they all carried. What if he decides we should go somewhere else, to different families, or back into the system? Then we'll appeal, Eleanor said from her wagon, riding parallel. We'll fight it. But that won't happen, Nora. The evidence is too strong. You're thriving here. Anyone with eyes can see that. People don't always look at what's real. They look at what they expect to see. Nora's voice was steady, but her jaw was tight. They'll see a single man with 8 kids and think it's improper. Think there should be a woman. Think we'd be better off separated and placed in real families. Cole understood her fear because he shared it. For all of Warren's assurances and Eleanor's confidence, the law was a fickle thing, subject to the whims of whoever interpreted it. He'd seen good men destroyed by legal technicalities and bad men prosper because they knew which palms to grease. Nothing was certain until the judge's gavel fell. The territorial courthouse in Cheyenne was a 3-story brick building that tried for grandeur and achieved something closer to intimidating. They climbed the steps together, Cole leading the way with Lily's hand in his, the other children following in a protective cluster with Nora at the rear, her crutch tapping against marble floors that echoed with the sound of official business being conducted. Daniel Warren met them in the hallway outside the courtroom, his expression cautiously optimistic. Judge Morrison is hearing the case. He's fair, thorough, and he read every page of testimony and evidence we submitted. That's good news. What's the bad news? Cole asked. There isn't any, exactly. But there is a complication. Warren gestured down the hall, where a well-dressed couple stood conferring with a lawyer. The Harrisons. They're a wealthy family from Denver, no children of their own, and they've petitioned the court for custody of the twins. Cole felt his stomach drop. What? They claim they can provide better opportunities, education, social standing, financial security. They're offering to adopt David and Daniel legally, give them the Harrison name, raise them as their own sons. Warren's expression was grim. On paper, it's a compelling case. Rich family, established reputation, able to provide advantages a rancher can't match. Nora's face went white. The twins, overhearing, pressed closer to Cole, their identical faces stricken with identical fear. Samuel reached out and took Daniel's hand, or was it David's, and held on like he could prevent the separation through sheer force of will. They can't, Nora whispered. They can't just split us up. We're a family. Not legally, not yet. Warren squeezed Cole's shoulder. But that's what this hearing will determine. Let me do the talking in there. Answer questions honestly when asked, but let me handle the legal arguments. Trust me. They filed into the courtroom, a space that felt too large and too formal, with wood paneling and high ceilings that made every sound echo. Judge Morrison sat at the bench, a man in his 60s with silver hair and reading spectacles, his face weathered in a way that suggested he'd seen enough of human nature to be skeptical of easy answers. The Harrisons sat on one side with their lawyer, a sharp-faced man who radiated expensive competence. Cole and the children sat on the other with Warren. Eleanor positioned herself in the gallery with a dozen other supporters. Henry Ashford, Doc Morrison, the rancher women who'd helped rebuild, even Tom from the general store. A showing of community support that Warren had carefully orchestrated. Judge Morrison called the court to order and reviewed the case briefly. We're here to determine permanent guardianship of 8 minor children currently in the temporary custody of Cole Harland. I've reviewed the documentation, the testimony regarding the circumstances of their rescue, and the subsequent events involving Sheriff Crowley and Silas Black. I've also received a petition from Mr. and Mrs. Harrison seeking custody of 2 of the children. We'll address the primary guardianship first, then the Harrison petition. Mr. Warren, you may begin. Warren stood and laid out the case with clinical precision. He detailed how Cole had found the children, saved their lives, provided consistent care and support despite personal cost. He presented the testimony of Doc Morrison regarding their improved health, statements from Eleanor and others regarding Cole's character, evidence of the children's educational progress under Nora's tutelage. These children were discarded by a system that saw them as defective, undesirable, not worth the effort of placement. Mr. Harland saw them as human beings deserving of life, dignity, and love. The results speak for themselves. 8 thriving children who've formed a family unit with Mr. Harland at its center. The Harrisons' lawyer stood, sleek and confident. No one disputes Mr. Harland's good intentions, but good intentions don't replace material advantages. My clients can provide opportunities that a working rancher cannot: private education, music lessons, social connections, travel, cultural enrichment. They're offering David and Daniel Harrison a future that far exceeds what they could expect in rural Wyoming. Judge Morrison looked at the twins. Boys, do you know who Mr. and Mrs. Harrison are? David, or Daniel, Cole still had trouble telling them apart sometimes, shook his head. His brother did the same, their movements synchronized. They're the people who want to adopt you. give you their name, raise you as their sons. Do you understand what that means? One of the twins found his voice, high and trembling. It means they want to take us away from our family. Your family? You mean Mr. Harland? And Nora and Wen and Samuel and Patrick and Mary and Lily. All of us. We're a family. The boy's voice strengthened. We take care of each other. We promised. After Miss Abigail died, after everything that happened, we promised we'd stick together. The other twin spoke up. The people on the orphan train, they wanted to separate us too. Said nobody needed two boys, said we'd be easier to place individually. But Miss Abigail said no, said we'd already lost everything, and we weren't losing each other too. She died keeping that promise. We're not breaking it now. Mrs. Harrison leaned forward, her face sympathetic. Boys, we're not trying to hurt you. We just want to give you a better life. Better than what? Nora's voice cut through the courtroom, sharp and challenging. She stood leaning on her crutch, her young face fierce. Better than having enough to eat? Better than sleeping in warm beds? Better than being taught to read and write and work with our hands? Better than being loved exactly as we are? Miss Vance, the judge said mildly, I appreciate your passion, but no, Your Honor, please, let me speak. Nora hobbled forward to the witness area, positioning herself where everyone could see her. I know what I look like to people like the Harrisons. Broken, damaged, not worth the effort. That's what every family on the orphan train thought when they saw my leg. That's what the placement officials thought. That's what everyone thought except Mr. Harland and the people in this courtroom who actually took the time to see us as people. She turned to face the Harrisons directly. You want David and Daniel because they're young and healthy and easy to shape into whatever you think proper sons should be. But you don't want the rest of us, do you? You don't want the girl with the crutch, or the Indian girl, or the black boy, or the Irish kid, or the girl who coughs, or the child who can't speak. You want the convenient parts of our family and none of the complicated ones. That's not fair, Mrs. Harrison protested. We simply don't have the resources to take all 8. You have money. You have a big house. You have everything except what actually matters. You don't have love that sees past convenience. Nora's voice cracked, but didn't break. Mr. Harland had nothing but a ranch and a broken heart when he found us. He didn't pick and choose which of us deserved saving. He saved all of us, fed all of us, fought for all of us. And now we're a family, and families don't get divided because someone rich decides they want part of it. Judge Morrison studied Nora for a long moment. How old are you, Miss Vance? 10, Your Honor. Nearly 11. You're very articulate for 10. I had to grow up fast, we all did. But Mr. Harlan is teaching us it's okay to be children again, to play and laugh and make mistakes without being told we're worthless. The Harrisons might give David and Daniel fancy schools and nice clothes, but they can't give them what we have. They can't give them us. She sat down, and the courtroom was silent except for the sound of Mrs. Harrison quietly crying. Judge Morrison cleared his throat. Mr. Warren, I'd like to hear from Mr. Harland directly. Mr. Harland, please approach. Cole stood and walked forward, acutely aware of 8 pairs of eyes watching him, of Eleanor's supportive presence in the gallery, of everything riding on whatever he said next. Mr. Harland, you're a single man, never remarried after your wife's death. Do you understand the concern some might raise about the propriety of a single man raising 8 children, particularly girls? Yes, Your Honor. I understand people talk. People always talk when something doesn't fit their idea of how things should be. How do you respond to those concerns? Cole thought about the past 2 months, about watching Nora learn to smile, about Samuel's determination to educate himself, about Lily whispering that one precious word, about Patrick becoming the horseman his father had been, about Wen's garden growing despite the brutal heat, about the twins' laughter, about Mary's health returning. I respond that those concerns are based on assumptions about what children need, and those assumptions are wrong. These kids don't need a perfect family that looks right on paper. They need a safe place where they're valued for who they are, not who someone wants them to be. They need consistency. They need to know that when they wake up tomorrow, they'll still be together, still be home, still be wanted. He paused. I'm not a perfect father. I don't know all the right things to say or do, but I show up every day and I love them, and I'll fight anyone who tries to take them from me. Including wealthy, well-intentioned people who can offer material advantages you cannot? Especially them, because money can't buy what we have. Money can't buy Nora teaching her siblings to read by lamplight, can't buy Patrick's patience with a frightened horse, can't buy the way Lily took my hand and spoke her first word in months, can't buy Samuel's questions about the world, or Wen's quiet strength, or the twins' fierce loyalty to each other. Cole's voice roughened. The Harrisons want to give 2 boys opportunities. I'm giving 8 children a childhood. There's a difference. Judge Morrison made notes, his expression unreadable. Then he addressed the Harrisons. Mrs. Harrison, why do you specifically want David and Daniel? She dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief. We've been unable to have children of our own. We thought we could provide them with everything. Give them chances they wouldn't have otherwise. Did you consider adopting all 8 children? That seemed overwhelming. 8 children with such varied needs, such different backgrounds. We thought starting with the easiest 2, Nora muttered, loud enough to be heard. Judge Morrison's mouth twitched slightly. Miss Vance makes a valid point, however inelegantly. You're proposing to separate siblings who've bonded through shared trauma for your convenience. He looked at the twins. Boys, final question. If I granted the Harrisons' petition, if I said you had to go with them, what would you do? The twins looked at each other, that silent communication that only twins seem to possess, then back at the judge. They spoke in unison. We'd run away. We'd find our way back to the ranch. We'd keep running until we got home. Even knowing the Harrisons could give you advantages Mr. Harlan cannot? We don't want advantages, one twin said, and we want our family. Judge Morrison sat back, removed his spectacles, and cleaned them slowly. The courtroom held its breath. Finally, he replaced the spectacles and picked up his gavel. I've spent 30 years on the bench hearing cases that made me question human nature. I've seen children treated as property, as burdens, as commodities to be bought and sold. I've seen the legal system fail vulnerable people more times than I can count. He looked at Cole, then at the children, then at the Harrisons. This is not one of those times. He turned to the Harrisons. Your petition is denied. These children are not puzzle pieces to be selected based on convenience. They're a family unit, and the law recognizes that family bonds, even those formed outside of blood relations, deserve protection. Your intentions may be good, but your approach disregards the fundamental well-being of the children involved. Mrs. Harrison slumped in her seat, her husband's arm around her shoulders. Their lawyer started to object, but Judge Morrison silenced him with a look. As for the primary matter before this court, I'm granting permanent legal guardianship of all 8 children to Cole Harlan, effective immediately. The evidence overwhelmingly supports this decision. The children are healthy, educated, emotionally stable, and clearly devoted to Mr. Harlan and to each other. Furthermore, the community support demonstrated here today indicates that these children are not being raised in isolation, but as part of a larger social fabric. He brought the gavel down, the sound echoing through the courtroom like a benediction. Mr. Harlan, these children are legally yours. Treat them well. For a moment, no one moved. Then Lily launched herself from her seat and ran to Cole, wrapping her arms around his waist with the first spontaneous display of affection she'd ever shown. The other children followed, Nora limping fast on her crutch, the twins moving in perfect synchronization, Samuel and Patrick and Mary and Wen all converging in a tangle of arms and tears and laughter. Eleanor was crying in the gallery. Henry Ashford was grinning. Even Doc Morrison looked misty-eyed. Warren clasped Cole's shoulder with satisfaction, and the Harrisons quietly left, their lawyer gathering papers with professional efficiency that couldn't quite hide his disappointment. Judge Morrison watched the celebration with something that might have been a smile. Court is adjourned. Mr. Harlan, the clerk will have your guardianship papers ready within the hour. Congratulations. They spilled out of the courthouse into brilliant sunshine, the children chattering and laughing with relief, the adults shaking hands and congratulating each other. Cole stood in the middle of the chaos, 8 children orbiting around him like planets around the sun, and felt a completeness he hadn't known was possible after Sarah died. We're really yours? Nora asked, like she still couldn't quite believe it. Legally? No one can take us away? You're really mine. All of you. Forever. She hugged him then. This fierce girl who'd protected 7 other children with nothing but determination and love, and Cole felt her shoulders shake with sobs she'd been holding back for months. He held her while she cried, while the other children pressed close, while Eleanor and the others gave them space for this private moment in a public place. When Nora finally pulled back, her face was blotchy and wet, but her eyes were clear. "Thank you," she whispered, "for not giving up on us, for fighting when it would have been easier to walk away, for being the father we needed." Cole couldn't speak past the lump in his throat, so he just nodded and pulled her close again, and they stood like that while Cheyenne bustled around them, oblivious to the small miracle that had just occurred in a territorial courthouse. The ride home took most of the day, and by the time the ranch came into view with the sun setting behind it, the children were exhausted from emotional upheaval and excitement, but they perked up when they saw what awaited them. The entire community had gathered, seemed like half the territory was there, with tables set up in the yard, food spread out in abundance, lanterns hung from tree branches and fence posts. A celebration, planned in advance by Eleanor and the others who'd been confident of the outcome, even when Cole had his doubts. "Surprise!" someone shouted, and the children were immediately swept up in congratulations and well-wishes, passed from person to person like precious cargo. The twins showed off their matching shirts that Mrs. Johnson had sewn special for the occasion. Patrick demonstrated his horse-handling skills for the cattlemen. Wen showed the women her garden. Samuel engaged Doc Morrison in a conversation about biology that left the doctor impressed and slightly bewildered. And Lily, silent Lily, sat on the porch with her rag doll and watched everything with those enormous eyes, but there was something different in her expression now, something that looked almost like peace. As evening deepened into night and the celebration continued, Cole found himself standing apart for a moment, watching his children legally and truly now, interact with the community that had fought for them. He thought about that day 2 months ago when he'd found them dying in the summer heat, about the journey from that moment to this one, about everything they'd survived and overcome together. Eleanor joined him, 2 cups of coffee in hand. She passed him one and stood beside him in comfortable silence.
"You did good, Cole." "We did good. Couldn't have done it without you, without all of them." He gestured at the gathered crowd. "Didn't realize how many people were willing to stand up when it mattered. Sometimes people need someone to stand up first. You gave us that. Gave us a reason to be better than our comfort and complacency." She sipped her coffee. "What comes next?" "Next? We live, we work the ranch, we raise these kids, we keep putting one foot in front of the other." He smiled slightly. "I imagine there'll be challenges. 8 children don't come without complications, but we'll figure it out together. That's simple. That's simple. And that complicated. But mostly just life. Real life. The kind I forgot how to live after Sarah died." Eleanor nodded, understanding without needing explanation.
They stood together watching the celebration, watching children laugh and play without the shadow of fear hanging over them, watching a community come together around something good and right and worth protecting. Later, after the guests had left and the children were in bed, Cole did a final check of the property. The new barn stood solid and strong, smelling of fresh lumber and possibility. The house glowed with lamplight from windows where 8 children slept safely. The summer night was cooling finally, autumn approaching with its promise of change and renewal. He thought about Sarah, about the baby they'd lost, about the 3 years he'd spent half dead with grief. He thought she'd approve of this, of him finding a reason to live again, of giving broken children a home the same way she'd always wanted to do. She'd always had a soft heart for strays and orphans, had talked about filling their house with laughter and noise and life.
"I did it," he said quietly to the night, to Sarah's memory, to the universe that had taken everything from him, and then, unexpectedly, given him a second chance. "I saved them, and they saved me right back." A light breeze rustled through the grass, carrying the scent of sage and summer's end. In the house, someone stirred, probably Nora, checking on the others, even in sleep, still the little general watching over her troops. Cole smiled and headed back inside. He found Lily sitting up in bed, her rag doll clutched tight, eyes wide in the darkness. Not scared exactly, but needing reassurance that everything was still real, still safe, still permanent. Cole sat on the edge of the bed. "Can't sleep?" She shook her head.
Want to talk about it? For a long moment, nothing. Then, in that whisper-quiet voice she'd only used once before, Lily spoke. 2 words this time instead of 1. Home now. Not a question. A statement. An understanding that after months of silence and fear and uncertainty, she'd finally found a place where she belonged, where she could start healing, where she could be a child again instead of a traumatized ghost. Yes, Cole confirmed, his voice rough with emotion. Home now, forever. Lily nodded, satisfied, and lay back down. Cole pulled the blanket up around her shoulders, and within minutes, she was asleep. One hand still clutching the doll, the other reaching out toward where her siblings slept nearby. Cole moved through the house quietly, checking on each child in turn. Nora sprawled across her bed, finally relaxed enough in sleep to look her actual age. The twins nested together like puppies, impossible to tell where one ended and the other began. Patrick curled on his side, dreaming of horses. Wen on her back, perfectly still, peaceful. Samuel with a book still open beside him, having fallen asleep while reading. Mary breathing easy and clear, the last traces of her cough finally gone. 8 children who'd been thrown away by a system that couldn't see their worth. 8 children who'd survived against impossible odds. 8 children who were now, legally and truly, his family. Cole returned to his own room, the room he'd shared with Sarah, the room that had been a tomb for 3 years, and was now just a place to sleep before waking up to purpose and noise and life. He lay down and closed his eyes, and for the first time in longer than he could remember, he fell asleep without grief being the last thing he felt. Outside, the summer night deepened toward dawn. The stars wheeled overhead in patterns ancient and familiar. The land stretched empty and vast, beautiful in its harshness, unforgiving but honest. And in a ranch house in Wyoming territory, 9 people slept, a family forged not from blood or law alone, but from the simple choice to show up for each other when the world said they didn't matter. The scorching summer of 1877 was ending. Autumn approached with its promise of change, and Cole Harlan's life, which had been frozen in grief and solitude, was finally